Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Let the filibustering begin.
Welcome to Nerd Party.
Hello and welcome to Filibuster here on the Nerd Party, the podcast that will need a bigger boat as we review The Meg this week. I'm your co-host Dallas King, and it was touch and go whether I'd make it this week because I just drove a car off a freeway on top of a train while it was on fire. Not the car, I was on fire. But of course, in order to catch a giant shark, you need a lot of chum. And so, the Stath to my ham, here's Lee Hutchison. How are you?
Yeah, I'm really good, thanks. I always love your introductions. They truly are the best, and mine always look so poor in comparison. It's like, hi, welcome to the Nerd Party, blah, 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 blah. And today's, yours are just on fire, yeah. This is why you've been brought on.
I can start scripting your introductions. I can do the introductions every week if you want.
Sounds good.
Cool. So, as of course we've mentioned, the big looming review we've got is The Meg, and later on we're also going to discuss our top 5 films either set on or underneath the deep blue sea. But before we dive into things, shall we do a quick catch-up of what we've been watching this week other than Jason Statham fighting giant sharks?
Absolutely, yeah. For me personally, I have only watched one movie, and that is the aforementioned Meg. The festival here in Edinburgh is in full swing, so I've been seeing some shows, doing some interviews. So I haven't had a chance to see a single movie apart from Meg. I will be seeing Christopher Robin on Thursday, but it's just been one of those kind of few weeks where it's just like comedy shows and theatre plays and stand-up and interviews and recording and editing interviews. So it's been a crazy one there, and it just feels like at the moment there's not much at the cinema. It's just like one big release will come out every 2 weeks, and it's like I've just looked at the schedule for Friday at the multiplex, and it's like not really much else has been added. It's more of the same, and even things like Jurassic World are still kind of holding strong here. It's kind of a bit frustrating. I think the summer sort of season is finally sort of winding down. Certainly up here, I think we're going to get like Christopher Robin and The Equalizer 2, which for some bizarre reason is not called The Sequelizer. I mean, come on. But I think, we're even at the independent cinemas, we're now just catching up with a few things because I watched First Reformed finally. This week it finally came up to Aberdeen about 6 weeks after it was initially out in some other cinemas, and that was an interesting watch, I have to say. You saw it probably mid-July, was it? Yeah, it's crazy to think it's been that long. Yeah, I saw it, and I'm curious to hear what you thought of it first.
I really liked it. There was a moment where it nearly lost me, I'll have to say. We can discuss, you might know what moment that might be, but we can discuss it a bit later. But I thought Ethan Hawke was fantastic, and I read an interview, I think it was an IMDb trivia, that Paul Schrader didn't realise that there were similarities to Taxi Driver until he started to watch the footage back and edit it together. And it's like, you didn't realise that, lots of voiceover about a slightly unstable man writing in a diary and trying to right wrongs was any bit like Taxi Driver. Okay. I thought it was fantastic, and I was really, really impressed with it. I love the style. I love the cinematography as well. It was all shot in sort of Academy ratio, and I thought it was just really sort of powerful, and it didn't really go where I expected it to go. What about yourself?
Yeah, I was a huge fan of it. I just find, I love Ethan Hawke. Ethan Hawke, I nearly said Ethan Hunt there. Because someone the other day went to me, how can people tell the two apart? When I've got a Before Sunset quad in my room, and someone went, Ethan Hawke, that reminds me of that guy from Mission Impossible, Ethan Hunt. So it's been kind of playing around in my head, but I just thought it was one of the best movies of the year. I mean, I am an atheist, for example, but I think the questions it poses about religion and environment and that uneasy alliance between the two, and especially in regards to politics and how what seems to be the obvious choice for religion and people that view, and this is God's creation, how do we look after it, and that those bedfellows don't seem to be so natural. I just thought it was fantastic, and there's just so many moments, especially in that kind of last 30 minutes, that I wouldn't even dare to kind of spoil, where it's so like, oh my god, what is actually going to happen here, where is this going to go? And there's just so many scenes where it genuinely shocks and surprises you, and it was, I couldn't believe it. It's I think it's going to be a film that will, I don't even know how people were going to kind of view this in a few years' time, but I hope people continue to see this film and find it, because it's one of Ethan Hawke's best performances. It's just incredible. The parallels between that and Taxi Driver are, astonishing, and I would recommend to anyone, if they get the chance, to listen to the A24 podcast. A24 do conversation podcasts where they shove two of their directors together to just have a conversation about maybe the movies they made, other people's films, and him and Sofia Coppola put together a conversation, Paul Schrader that is, all about this movie, and he's so open about his his religious experiences that kind of manifested themselves in this film, his influences, his thoughts on the ending, for example. It's one of the best kind of podcast hours of just two talented filmmakers just having a conversation. So I recommend it for yourself and anyone else that's seen First Reformed to listen to that kind of companion piece.
Oh, I definitely need to listen to this one, because I've got a lot of questions about the ending and stuff like that. I mean, I'm not really religious either, and so therefore I might have missed some sort of references to particular parts of the Bible and whatever, with the stories and the themes and things like that. But I thought it was a fascinating story. And you're right, Ethan Hawke was fantastic, but for me, I think he's one of the truly great underrated actors. He's just fantastic in everything, even stuff like Sinister, which could have been your very typical sort of genre horror sort of fare, was elevated by his performance. I thought he was fantastic in that. He sort of brings a grounded realism to any role that he plays, and I think I was really sort of disappointed when Benedict Cumberbatch was cast as Doctor Strange, because it was directed by Scott Derrickson, and there was a moment when I was really hoping that Ethan Hawke might have played Doctor Strange, because I think he would have brought something really interesting to the role, and it would have been interesting to see how he would have interacted in the MCU.
Yeah, I remember at the time hearing that he was going to be linked with this movie, and it was like, oh my god, Ethan Hawke in a movie like this would just be absolutely incredible. But part of me at the same time was really happy that he avoided it, because for someone like myself, he is like this indie movie darling. He's for the Before trilogy, he has like free passes for life, and I love that he continues to pick movies like that. Boyhood, First Reformed. So many other movies, when he pops up, it looks like a sign of class. I know there's a movie coming up which looks like some sort of bizarre kind of romantic comedy. I've only seen the poster on my iTunes thing. I don't know what the hell that
Juliet
is.
Naked. Is that the one? Yeah, it's based on a Nick Hornby book. He plays a sort of washed up rock star who ends up in a sort of email sort of relationship with someone whose husband is the biggest fan of this particular rock star or whatever, so it's like a love triangle sort of thing. But it could be it could be one of the sort of breakout sort of rom-coms of the year, or it could be something else, who knows. But I think he'll bring, whatever he does manage to bring something really quite interesting and unique to it. But I guess if I wanted to actually bring up even like The Purge, I mean, he managed to bring a sort of great sort of role to that. But I do need to big up a film which not many people will have seen. It's Predestination. Have you seen that one?
Yeah. I've seen Predestination. It's such an underrated movie. Did it even get released in the cinema?
I don't think it did. It maybe had like a couple of shows in London, but it was one that basically went straight to DVD, and it's one that people really need to sort of find out and sort of experience for themselves. It's basically, the less said going into it, it's got sort of like a time travel element to it. But I mean, it just sort of blew me away when I saw it, and it's like, and it really needs, and Ethan Hawke plays one of the main roles in it, and it's just a fantastic film. And please do see and check out Predestination and First Reformed if you can as well. Have you got any other underrated Ethan Hawke films that you
I'm on the spot now. I can't think of anything at the moment, but yes, I'll go with Predestination. And for the love of God, if you've not seen the Before trilogy, definitely check that out.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they're three. That's probably one of the all-time great, near perfect trilogies for me. Although I remember when I saw Before Sunset first, and loved
I did
it.
the same, yeah.
And then went back, watched the first one, and found myself not really liking Julie Delpy's character.
No,
but I've managed to. But I love the third one as well. But for me, the second one. It's the point when she reaches across in the taxi and to go to like touch his hair or something, and then pulls back. I mean, that moment is just like, that moment kills me every time I see it.
Yeah, there is one film I would recommend, an Ethan Hawke one that's somewhat underrated. Maggie's Plan, I think, had a short stint here at the festival a few years ago. A Greta Gerwig, Ethan Hawke, they play sort of lovers that have a child, and he comes out of a relationship to be with Greta Gerwig's character to then come back out of it again, and it's just sort of an interesting wee examination of this odd couple, essentially, this older professor and this younger woman. It's really good. It was kind of not long after something like Frances Ha, which I'm on the record as absolutely loving, so I was desperate for some new Greta Gerwig movie. And while it's definitely not any of their best movies, it's something real interesting to see Ethan Hawke as a bit of an asshole, really, in this kind of character, a bit of a love cheat, but still with that kind of charm that we all know he has.
No, absolutely. I can highly recommend Maggie's Plan as well. I thought it was fantastic. But I guess before this turns into the Ethan Hawke Love Hour, we should move on to the film that we were going to be discussing, and potential it could be another love-in for Britain's favourite bald action star, Jason Statham. It's time to talk about The Meg. Now, The Meg is
absolutely
a film which can simply be summed up as the Stath versus a giant shark. I mean, I think pretty sure that's how it was sold, without a script probably, and it's been co-financed between China and the US. If you didn't know that fact, I think you could probably be able to guess it from the fact that the film is set off the coast of Shanghai and has a multiracial cast. And yeah, I mean, I don't think we really need to say much more than that there's an underwater base, and they happen to let loose a giant shark, and Jason Statham has to stop it. So what did you think of The Meg?
Yeah, I was quite looking forward to this one. I think like the trailers kind of sold me. It was a movie that kind of came out of nowhere for me. I wasn't familiar with the book. I didn't even know it was in kind of pre-production. And like for me, it's like a down the middle 3 out of 5 movie, and like I never once thought like, oh, this is terrible, or I never thought, oh my god, this is really good. Like, you know, my girlfriend, you know, was really into it in that respect, that, you know, she was on her edge, she was nervous, you know, as soon as the little dog got into the ocean, I thought she was gonna like have a heart attack. And, you know, like I know for a fact they never kill a female dog in movies, it's never gonna happen, but like she got really into it, and I enjoyed it for what it was. You know, Jason Statham, you know, being Jason Statham is, you know, I enjoy him in every movie, and it put me in the mood to dust off the Crank DVDs. He's just an enjoyable actor, and it was one of these movies that kind of in the summer we've got so many kind of bloated blockbusters, you know, even for movies that I, you know, really like, say something like Mission Impossible is, you know, 2.5 hours. For something like this, it's, you know, the right kind of running time. It doesn't end with some sort of like, oh my god, there's another shark, or there's another twist about it. It was just like a self-contained, you know, summer, you know, romp, really. And I'll probably forget about it in a week, but for what it was on a Monday night after work, I enjoyed it. You know, the action scenes I thought were quite enjoyable. I thought some of the over the top moments, you know, it threaded that quite well. Yeah, I just found it completely inoffensive and just mildly enjoyable, and it reminded me of maybe a film I would have seen with my family when I was younger, where it was something that might just appeal to everyone. It isn't so geeky my dad won't want to go, it's not so horror that my mum won't want to see it. You know, I could imagine me and my brother have been like, oh, it's a big shark, and, you know, it's an action hero, something like that. And I kind of like the use of some of the technology, for example, where you see like Jetson style ships kind of navigating through the oceans. I kind of like that. And Rainn Wilson was, he was quite good. There's a scene where he's like, I'm really sorry guys, we've had some losses, and then he's like, the next scene he's kind of like got twisting the mustache. Really, I think it's just a nice blend of different movies, and obviously it does have an Asian kind of financing, which means it's got a bit of a diverse cast, which is always a good thing as well. So yeah, I enjoyed it. It made me happy, and I enjoyed it for what it was, but I have a sneaky feeling that you weren't a fan.
I was not a fan of the Meg. Sadly, I really wanted to enjoy it. I mean, I'd enjoyed the trailers, like that used like Beyond the Sea, and sort of sold up the carnage that was going to be involved with this giant shark. Taking out thousands and thousands of people off the coast of a beach, and only one man can stop this giant shark. But unfortunately, that's not the movie which I watched. I don't know if I just built this thing up in my head, but it'd been sold on Stath vs Shark, and I mean it does. I mean, I will give it that it does. In the final act, it does feature a scene where Jason Statham fights a giant shark single-handedly. So kudos to that. It doesn't pull The Grey, where the trailers promise you basically Liam Neeson fighting wolves in hand-to-hand combat, only for the not to happen. So plus points for that. But it was almost, there was an issue with, I felt that it didn't know what it wanted to be. Mm-hmm. It was very much a film of two halves, and that the first half was this sort of underwater rescue thing where Statham's character is a deep sea diver. He organizes deep sea rescues, and he's somehow manages to get. I mean, this was a point. This is the kind of movie where you're watching it on a Friday night, and it turns out that the woman who is trapped at the bottom of the ocean turns out to be his ex-wife, and that elicits a huge guffaw from the audience. Not as much as, actually, I was the only one who laughed out loud at this, but it was the line where they managed to basically take down the shark initially, and Rainn Wilson says something about it's not all bad, it's things turned out all right, and like someone goes, not for Toshi and not for science, and I just cracked up at that. I mean, it's like that line of dialogue was just like, oh my god. The problem was it turned into in the second half of the movie it becomes what it was probably supposed to be, a shark movie, but it seemed to be like a movie where this movie is a 12A and it's a PG-13 in America, and it feels like initially it was going to be an R-rated, straight for the wall, balls out horror, sort of full of gore, similar to what Piranha did a few years ago. Piranha 3D I thought was actually really enjoyable, and basically leaned into the sort of comic horror aspects of the storyline. Potentially, perhaps the problem with this film for me was the shark is so big that there's no chance to like bite anyone in half or anything, and it just sort of swallows them whole. And then that way there's not really any blood or guts, and that was what kind of disappointed me, was that the lack of visible carnage on screen.
Yeah, I wish it kind of fully embraced sort of something like Crank, where you come out of that and you think, like, when you watch the trailer for that, you think, oh, that's going to be like an action kind of movie. I always remember that, like, the trailer for Crank was like really played non-stop, kind of like it has been with the Meg. And like with Crank, you think that's like a very kind of serious movie, an action movie. Yeah, like I'll go see that. It looks pretty generic. And I remember going to see that at like 11 o'clock at night on Friday of release, and coming out of that going, that was not what I expected. That was just nuts. And to this day, like yesterday, I was like to my girlfriend, oh, it's got this scene, and oh my god, you won't believe this happens. Whereas like the Meg, when you watch that trailer, it is the same. It's trying to thread two things. Like at the beginning, it's like, ooh, a big shark movie. It's a bit tense. You see the young kid, and then it kind of cuts to that Jason Statham. It's a Megalodorus or whatever it was called.
It's a Megalodon.
Oh, right, it's kind of going to be playing to a laugh. And yeah, and like in the first kind of 40 minutes of this film, it's like, oh, it's building up the tension. Rainn Wilson is, he's a bit wacky. He's a humorous character, but everything else around him is pretty kind of straight-faced. And then you kind of have Jason Statham, and like you've got this rescue mission, which again is really tense. Some jokes. I did like how it was his ex-wife, but like it wasn't about them reconnecting. She's literally in it as just the excuse to get him there. I kind of like that. That didn't go down that trope. But I would like if it perhaps embraced sort of the maybe like the Jetsons underwater style vibe they had with like the ships and stuff. I think I thought maybe it was too nervous to go full way, but I think it could have been great.
Yeah, those sort of glider ship things, they reminded me of the Phantom Menace when like Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan are going down to with Jar Jar Binks and stuff. That's what they reminded me of, and so immediately that's not a good thing.
Perhaps not and stuff, and it's I definitely can see the resemblance there. Apart from it didn't have the little fin, little shakers at the back, but yeah, I think like. I just like that it was self-contained. I did expect it to be almost like, oh, here's the sequel at the end. And I think like it has one of the finest, best shots to close a movie of the past year. I thought it was so cool. So, it's not remarkable in any respect. But it's almost nice to have a sort of a throwback movie in this respect. And I kind of... few years where the throwbacks has been sequels to franchises that should have stayed dead or have been diminishing returns. For this to be sort of like a standalone movie in the summer was kind of nice, a nice little change. And when you look down the list of things at the cinema just now, it stands out in that respect. So it's nice to have a chat about a one-off original film, and they'll maybe do a sequel again in the future. But yeah, I was happy enough with it. It wasn't a bad way to spend a Monday night.
Yeah, no, I mean, if it wasn't for the Stath, then I think I would have had very little interest in this at all. I think his charisma and sort of, he knew what kind of movie he was in and sort of played up to that, and therefore all the scenes that he was in worked really well. It was almost set up, there was too many similarities, I think, for me to Deep Blue Sea, which sort of did this film much better, and that was nearly probably 20 years ago. You've got this large supporting cast of people who are essentially there to be eaten, and not wanting to spoil anything, but a surprisingly small number actually didn't make it to the final reel, and that was again slightly disappointing. But I think it was just a bit toothless for me, I think is the word. And I would have liked to have seen proper 18 rated or 15 rated that played into the horror aspect and the gore aspect. And there was some people seemed to be playing it very, very straight, and some people seemed to know what kind of movie it was, like Rainn Wilson and Jason Statham, but some of the other people, and I think there is a cut out there somewhere where it is a proper R-rated horror, and this has been cut down to become a sort of more family-friendly, let's sell it to as wide an audience as possible. And I mean, it seems to be working. I mean, it's done very, very well over the weekend, and I think definitely well enough that there will turn out to be another shark or another underwater sea creature that they will need to take down in the future, because I don't think we've seen the last of this franchise.
I hope not, and I would like if it was just a self-contained one, and I suppose the kind of closing shot of the film does promise a bit of a finality in a way. But I wouldn't be surprised to maybe do another one again. Like, there was a sort of twist within the movie that could almost open up for another sequel, but they play that card quite early here. And Jason Statham, for the most part, he does, he doesn't sort of, he does do sequel kind of movies and stuff, but I just can't picture a second Meg movie, and I think they've played the kind of cards here, but maybe it'll be a sort of different creature in the future or something a bit different. It could almost be in a sort of cinematic universe with something like the Godzilla movies, for example, which I think are Warner Brothers as well. Are they? Or that's Universal? I can't remember.
They're I think Warner Brothers and Legendary. I think So there's potential for the Megalodon to turn up. I guess we'll just have to see what happens in the future. But I know this Stath is going to be busy with Fast and Furious films and whatever for the next while. But if he's not too tired of franchise work, then there's always another trip back down under the water.
Absolutely, and Jason Statham should be in more films. He does pick and choose his projects, and I think I don't think he's really picked a bad movie as such yet. He's even if a film's maybe not the greatest, he's always one of the best things in it, and I look forward to his return in the Fast and the Furious movie, especially him and The Rock paired up together. I mean, that is a pairing that me and you can only dream of matching.
Indeed, yeah, and directed by the director of John Wick and Atomic Blonde as well. So I think that potentially could become the new franchise, and because I think for me my interest in the Fast and Furious films was very, very minimal until The Rock turned up, and for me the films have just got better and better, and I think I could see myself in a situation where I'm more interested in Shaw and Hobbs spin-offs than I am with the actual Fast and Furious franchise. So I guess we'll see what happens with that. But I mean, the Stath is very dependable, and he's one of those actors who, whatever role he's in, he seems to be just Jason Statham. But he knows, he is a hark back to the late 80s, early 90s, that kind of action star who knows what they do and does it very, very well. I mean, I do like films where he kind of plays on that. So Spy is one of my favourite performances of his in recent years. But there was a website that had done a quiz or something. It was like, name the Jason Statham film, and it was basically 15 shots of him bald with stubble wearing a suit and pointing a gun, and you had to guess which film it was. So yeah, I mean, there's jokes to be had, but I think he's one of the first people who will take the piss out of himself and knows exactly what he's all about and does it very well.
Yeah, I think so, and yeah, colour me hopeful for the future of Jason Statham.
Absolutely. So today's top 5 pick is going to be based, going off the Meg, we decided to talk about our top 5 films either set on or under the deep blue sea, because actually I realised that if I said on top or under the ocean, then we could have technically picked Ocean's 11, because I was Googling ocean films earlier, and that actually came up as one of the options. I was like,
it did, yeah.
That's not exactly what I was going for. So I'm presuming that you don't have either any of the Ocean's films from
No.
If
I was struggling, I might have put something in there thinking I was being a bit of a smartass.
But you did ask for a special dispensation because we normally talk about our top 5 films, but because here on the Nerd Party we talk about all sorts of popular culture, from films to TV and all sorts, you wanted to include a TV show, so we're opening this up to top 5 films and TV shows. So do you want to kick us off with your number 5, and is it in ascending order?
Yeah, I've put them into ascending order because
Fantastic.
I'm being a good egg. So I have 3 movies and 2 television shows.
Ooh.
So my first choice is, and perhaps maybe the not obvious choice, but I picked a Stargate SG-1 episode called Descent, and it is the 6th season episode, and it comes kind of hot off the heels of the 2-parter season opener. And the reason I picked this one was that, for people that haven't seen the episode, or don't see the Stargate reruns endlessly on Sky 2, the episode is sort of hot on the heels of Jonas Quinn now officially joining the SG-1 team, and the team head up into orbit to discover an alien attack vessel orbiting Earth, and they discover that it belongs to their enemy Anubis. But the ship is abandoned, and the consciousness of Thor, the alien, is causing the ship to malfunction. So the ship begins a descent towards the Pacific Ocean, and there's no way to stop it. And the crew find themselves stranded on the bottom of the ocean, looking to escape an alien vessel and get back to the surface. So one of the reasons I picked this was I kind of tried to put myself thinking, obviously one of the obvious Stargate underwater ones to pick is Atlantis, obviously. But with something like Descent, it was such a kind of exciting idea at the time. We were back in sort of 2002. And Stargate had just sort of made the transfer from Showtime to Sci-Fi. And not to say that the show wasn't great on Showtime, it certainly was. But the budget was within its means. But when it moved to sort of the Sci-Fi channel, it felt invigorated, it felt brand new. And this kind of came hot off the heels of sort of the 2-parter. And I remembered at the time I was big into internet spoilers. You're reading about TV episodes that are months away from being aired on the TV shows here in the UK on Sky. I remember reading about this episode and just thinking of the idea of an alien spaceship crashing into the Earth ocean and a crew trying to escape it just sounded really exciting, and to see that perhaps on a TV budget gave it a sort of an exciting scope and scale that it never really had Stargate. A lot of it was, kicking around the Canadian woods, and I just really liked this episode, and I find it enjoyable. It makes use of the the underwater scenes, the usual, someone's got to deep dive and kind of free the ship, etc. But I think it's an enjoyable episode, and it was enjoyable at the time, and it was one I was so hyped up for just based on the concept when I read it months before seeing it on the TV show. And yeah, it was written obviously by Joseph Malozzi and Paul Mully, and for anyone that's listened to kind of our episode, it's Joseph Malozzi appeared on Filibuster just earlier this month, and he spoke about kind of making these action adventure episodes, and that was his specialty, and it certainly was with this episode, and I recommend it highly.
Well, I'll need to check it out, and I guess now's the time to admit that I've not actually ever seen any Stargate beyond the actual first film, so it's something which I might need to binge watch at some point. But I believe there's how many different series of Stargate are there now?
3 series worth of it. We have 3 series of it. We have the film, we have 2 straight to DVD movies, and there's a random cartoon series which has nothing to do with the canon of the TV series, but I highly recommend it. I watched Stargate Universe, the 3rd one, which only lasted 2 seasons. I tend to watch that sometimes over breakfast. It's on at like 7 till 8 in the morning, so I usually, after I've had my shower and I'm sitting down to my breakfast, I'm watching it, and it has Robert Carlyle as a lead in a sci-fi series, which is always wonderful to see him in something like this. So yeah, it's worth watching. It's an episode that Stargate is a very rich show in terms of tying into previous episodes, and the consciousness of Thor the alien, not Thor the god as such, of the Marvel movies. Yeah, it ties into something that kind of happens in the season 5 finale. So it's a hard one to watch in perhaps isolation, but it's enjoyable nonetheless for fans.
Excellent. My number 5 pick is an absolute classic, and one that sort of appears near on TV sort of every sort of holiday period, and that's the Poseidon Adventure. I must stress the original Poseidon Adventure, not the one with Kurt Russell and around about 2010. Poseidon Adventure was released in 1972 and is one of those classic sort of disaster movies where you spend sort of the first half hour on this cruise ship called the Poseidon, and it sort of introduces you to characters like sort of Gene Hackman's Reverend Scott. You've got the famous sort of Shelley Winters. You've got people like Roddy McDowell and Ernest Borgnine and whatever. So you've got this whole different group of characters who are experiencing, it's New Year's Eve. They're having a party on this cruise ship. And the captain's actually played by Leslie Nielsen from The Naked Gun and Police Squad. And basically, the ship encounters a huge wave and gets tipped over, and basically the rest of the movie is the survivors have to make it from the top of the ship, which is now the bottom of the ship, to the top of the ship, which is actually the bottom of the ship. And you basically go through trying to work their way up to the top so they can try to get rescued. And it's, as I said, it's your standard sort of disaster movie, so you know that not all of them are going to make it, and some of them will perish in shocking or sort of terrible ways. And it's just one of those ones it's sort of one of those films which I remember as watching as a kid, but then rewatching as an adult, you get to see the sort of the way that films like this are constructed and the sort of storytelling techniques, and it's just one of those sort of classic films, and it's got just a great sort of lead performance from Gene Hackman. And I just think it's just a classic film which is fun for the whole family, I think.
Yeah, and you sort of see it's one of the most kind of inspiring things. Like, obviously I was just talking about that Stargate episode there, like the influence of the Poseidon Adventure on that is so noticeable, and it seems like a lot of TV series kind of and movies have been inspired by that. Like it's the best that's ever been at that kind of underwater kind of escape movie, and it seems like no other show or movie's ever been able to match it. They can only just echo and inspire it.
Yeah, I mean, you've got the ones like the original, like Earthquake and Towering Inferno and stuff like that, and they're basically the same movie, but you've got one on a boat, one on a building, and so it's that kind of thing. But I think for me, Poseidon Adventure is the one that does it best, and it's my personal favorite out of those disaster movies.
Yeah, absolutely, and it makes me think if this was number 5, what could the next 4 be for you?
Oh, well, we will find out soon enough. But at number 4, what have you got for us?
Yeah, I picked another sort of my last sort of TV episode here and it's another one. It's probably one of my least favorite Star Trek series, but Star Trek Voyager did a really fantastic episode about sort of a water planet essentially, and I can't remember the absolute nonsense of the science that they were able to justify that there was a planet strictly based with water, but basically, to sort of summarize this episode briefly, is Tom Paris is demoted to ensign and sentenced to 30 days in the brig for disobeying orders. And while serving time in the brig, Tom writes a letter to his father about the events that led to his demotion. When they visit this water planet and they discover that things are being polluted, and Tom decides to take things into his own hands and put an end to this, planet-wide water pollution. Really, it's one of these episodes where Star Trek in particular, especially in the kind of the 90s and most particular Voyager, was really incredibly episodic, that you visit a planet, it was a sound stage, it was kind of, you were never really blown away by these planets. And sort of in that kind of late 90s stage, like CGI was becoming more noticeable. You could make a water planet before it was just like sort of a matte painting that your model ship would be flying by. And I just really think this episode is quite interesting because it shows consequences of the characters' actions here. And even though it's something like a demotion, Voyager was always, you could have, like, there was the two-parter where they found another starship crew and like they committed treason, and then they were going to be integrated into the crew, and they were never seen from again. Like, you rarely ever saw the consequence of people's actions. And I think Tom Paris was always one of my favorite Voyager characters. Him, the Doctor, because they felt like relatable, they felt human, even if they weren't all human characters. And I think with this episode, seeing sort of like the underwater planet, the visuals of this, the Delta Flyer, the shuttlecraft being essentially turned into a submarine and going deep underwater, it was some fantastic visuals. It was a really exciting and unique episode of Star Trek Voyager that's really stuck with me. And it's its 20th anniversary and it come December. So, and for me, I always rate it as one of my favorite episodes of the the franchise, in particular Voyager. And I think it just looks really cool. And I think the message about the environment and how we treat the ocean is something that's universal. And while we have all these movies perhaps about underwater, conservation, the environment isn't always perhaps at the forefront, where something like Star Trek, where it is always looking to champion at its best environmental causes, political causes, all these sorts of things. I think this episode does it well and is vintage Star Trek.
Absolutely, and it sounds like it was about 20 years ahead of its time, because the ocean and sort of environment is definitely a huge thing this year, and it's only now that when Blue Planet 2 came out that everyone suddenly realised, oh yeah, we actually need to stop chucking all this plastic in the ocean, and suddenly it's getting debated in the Houses of Parliament and everyone wants to ban single-use plastics and stuff like that. So I guess we have David Attenborough to thank for that, but maybe we have that episode of Star Trek Voyager to thank for. Maybe it was the inspiration for the whole Blue Planet 2 series.
One can only, I think that would be giving Voyager more credit than it deserves.
Okay, so number 4 on my list, and I have the very simple story of a father searching for his son across the ocean, and of course it can only be Pixar's Finding Nemo. And
interesting choice.
Well, it's CGI, computer generated water, but it still counts for me. I think it still counts, and I just love this particular Pixar movie. I love the characters. I love the fact that Albert Brooks is in a Pixar movie, and you've got such wonderful characters such as Dory. You've got the Bruce the shark, and I think it's just a great sort of story of just a neurotic, slightly Woody Allen-esque father who's never been really outside of the section of coral that he's ever been in, but plucks up the courage to basically go across the ocean to bring back his son, the only sort of family member that he's still got. And it's just a really sort of very, very funny, moving, warming Pixar film full of some great, fantastic vocal performances and some fantastic animation as well, and really sort of showed what Pixar was capable of at that time. And for me, it's at my number 4.
Yeah, I have, like, I never saw kind of Finding Nemo until maybe like 4 years ago. For some reason, I just never kind of got around to it. I always remembered I had just started working at a Tesco at the time that the video came out, probably sort of the tail end of the video kind of, phase dying off. I think it was like kind of 2004 or something like that. I was working at Tesco, and I just was constantly selling so many copies of Finding Nemo that year. I remembered my birthday card for my parents was like a Finding Nemo card, because I kept moaning about constantly having to sell Finding Nemo DVDs to families. So I finally saw it, and it was one of those ones that perhaps passed me by. Maybe I'm just a bit too boring and cynical, but I enjoyed the movie fine enough, and I liked the birds and the stuff that took place in the dentist place. I enjoyed that a lot, but I never got around to seeing the sequel. It's just it's for when I think sort of the Pixar movies, I feel like I've maybe got a disconnect with anything that's not like the Incredibles one, like the Toy Story trilogy. I feel like I don't know, I've just sort of not connected with it too well, and I think it's just strictly all me.
Yeah, no, I mean the sequel, Finding Dory, is essentially just the first film, but in this case they're trying to find Dory instead. And it's not a patch on the original, but I still think the original is up there with the peak Pixar films that they were making, and that they had like an incredible run, I think actually probably up until about The Incredibles, and then they started to do Cars and stuff like that, and it kind of lost some of the sort of uniqueness and the sort of incredible storytelling that they managed to come up with. But for me, it's still one of my favourites and one of my favourite seafaring films. So what have you got for us at number 3?
Yeah, I've gone for Captain Phillips. I'm sure most people don't need an introduction to this movie that has become quite the meme in the past few years. But Captain Phillips is it looks at the hijacking of the USS container ship by a crew of Somalian pirates. It's Tom Hanks and Paul Greengrass coming together, and I think it's one of the most tensest movies I've kind of ever watched at the cinema. This hijacking, is just, you're watching the whole time, and I remember reading afterwards that the SEAL team that go to save Captain Phillips and the crew were the same people that would end up going out to take out Osama bin Laden. So I highly recommend Captain Phillips and Zero Dark 30 as a double bill if anyone's looking for it. But I just think this examination of a hijacking at sea is just, Paul Greengrass has done, his kind of past few years has been a bit of a mixed bag. For every Captain Phillips there's a bit of a green zone, or the new Jason Bourne movie, but his new kind of Netflix movie looks pretty interesting, so I'm kind of hopeful about that. But I think Tom Hanks in this as Captain Phillips gives in a hell of a performance, and that kind of final stretch of the movie where he just breaks down from all the stress that he's gone through, and now that he's safe is just fantastic. I really thought this film was just the absolute bee's knees when it came out.
That particular scene which you're talking about, like the final 5 minutes, where he's had to be like a pillar of strength. He has had to show basically no weakness in order to make sure that his crew are okay, and basically all survive this. And when that is taken away from him and he's just left, at the end it's all over, and he's just suddenly like, he doesn't know what to do, and he breaks out. For me, that was one of the single greatest moments of acting I have ever seen in my life. And I was like, when he did that, I was like, that's it, he's got the Oscar. And then he wasn't even nominated that year, which I thought was an absolute shame, because for me, it was one of the finest moments of acting I've ever seen. And the whole film is incredible. And there was also another great film, a Hijacking, a Danish film called Hijacking, which is another, it's more of a sort of two-hander in that half of it looks at the crew on the ship, but it also has the sort of the people behind the scenes sort of receiving the sort of demands and stuff, and trying to work out whether or not they're going to pay it and stuff like this. So it's another fantastic film which looks at hijacking. But Captain Phillips I did have serious consideration about whether or not that was going to be on my list as well. I thought it was just superb.
I think hijacking is really good, but it feels very much procedural. You're just sort of watching the movie sort of from the boardroom, that is really interesting and exciting. It's a nice companion piece to actually being on there, but it kind of came out in and around the sort of time of Captain Phillips. And when you watch a movie like that, which is really tense, the action's in your face, to kind of go from that to sort of watching people talking in a boardroom and having conference calls just doesn't pack the same punch, for something similar. It's very much the Ants and Bug Life and Deep Impact and such like kind of double bill of our time, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, number 3 on my list is a film which features another Battle of Wills, similar to the Somali Pirates and Captain Phillips, but mine is Crimson Tide. And Crimson Tide is a Tony Scott film from the late 80s, early 90s, and it features Gene Hackman as the commanding officer of a submarine and his new deputy, played by Denzel Washington. And the premise is that they have received a mission where they are to launch a attack on a Russian nuclear base if it looks like they're going to launch an attack on the US. Now, they receive one transmission saying they go for launch, and then they receive part of a second transmission but then they are attacked and then they are unable to receive the full message. Now, Gene Hackman wants to launch the missiles, whereas Denzel Washington wants to wait and find out if that message was actually to rescind that order. And what we then get is a battle of wills between the two that involves sort of mutiny and also sort of physical, and sort of playing off the two each other between these sort of two opposing forces, and how their relationship and their sort of back and forth affects the entire ship and the mission. And it's all sort of done in this very claustrophobic environment of the submarine, and it also features Hans Zimmer score, which you can imagine is also very loud and bombastic and just increases the pressure before things reach a sort of final sort of climax. And for me, it's just, one of those, it's probably my favourite submarine film. I know a lot of people might put sort of Das Boot, some people might put Black Sea, but I can't ever have that because it features Jude Law, who is apparently doing a Doric Aberdeen accent. But
he is, yeah. I can 100% confirm this.
You can confirm that that's what he was doing, or that's what he was trying to do, because I listened to it and I was like, I've never heard anyone speak like that up here.
No. I respect that he went down and sort of did, instead of like a Glaswegian accent, he went kind of our sort of regional accent. And me and you sort of grew up and you still live in that neck of the woods. We do not sound like Jude Law in that movie.
No, but I think they basically went, it needs a Scottish accent, but what should we do? Oh, they've got like oil and up in Aberdeen. Yeah, we'll go with that because everyone obviously goes on submarines instead of oil rigs up here. But credit to him for it was definitely a Scottish accent that he did. Whether it was a Doric accent, I'm still not entirely sure. But what are your thoughts on Crimson Tide and maybe the accents in that?
I haven't seen that movie in quite a long time. I do remember it very fondly. I think it was that sort of movie that everyone's dad probably had on VHS or rented from Blockbuster at the time. It was that I haven't watched it probably maybe 15 years plus. So my memories of it are pretty sketchy, apart from some of the showdowns. But I've seen kind of Hans Zimmer a couple of times live in the past few years, and whenever sort of Crimson Tide comes on, that is one of the best ones to hear with a live score and an orchestra. It's just packs such a punch. So I really need to revisit it.
Yeah, no, it's one that I kind of catch occasionally on, if it's on TV late at night, you just come across it. It's one of those films. It's always a sign of a good film that if you just come across it, and even if you've missed part of it, you end up watching it to the end, and that's something that I always do with Crimson Tide. But we're nearing the end here. So what have you got for us at number 2?
This shouldn't be a surprise to anyone that knows me, but I've gone with The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou. I think it's one of the absolute best movies of perhaps all time. It would certainly be in my top tier of movies, and I think it's by far the most original and beautiful movie based underwater for a variety of different reasons. I think the idea of someone going out to sea to get revenge is nothing new. If people have ever heard of a small book called Moby Dick, but I think with this, you will never get a more beautiful moment underwater than Bill Murray, Jeff Goldblum, Angelica Houston, this whole cast of characters underwater in this sort of underwater vehicle, surrounded by stop motion creatures with the Sia Ross Starafleur theme playing as it happens as we come face to face with the jaguar shark is probably one of the most beautiful moments I've ever seen in a film, and it still strikes me as one of the most emotional, and it's a movie that's influenced me in many different ways, and I was gutted. I missed this movie at the cinema, and I remember the first time I watched it on DVD, I'd just seen Royal Tenenbaums a few years earlier at the cinema when it came out, and I was desperate for a new Wes Anderson movie, and it kind of disappointed me a little bit, but it's a movie I've grown to love so much over the years. And I remembered last year I went to a Wes Anderson all-nighter, and then sadly fell asleep through most of the Life Aquatic, but only a few months later I was finally able to see the Life Aquatic fully on the big screen, and to see those moments and those visuals on a big screen were wonderful. And I think Steve Zissou is one of the great, most memorable characters. Bill Murray is like the proper lead actor in a movie like this. It's just something else, and it's just filled with so many memorable moments, great quotes. Jeff Goldblum joins the Wes Anderson universe. I just think it's wonderful, and it just strikes an emotional chord every single time.
Yeah, this is a film which I've realised, I think I drafted up a list earlier in the week and then lost it, and then had to make another list, and I'm pretty sure I think I had Life Aquatic on my original list. I'm just thinking about it going, of course, yeah, no, I probably should have had that on my list. Because, yeah, it's one of my favourite Wes Anderson films, and it's got, yeah, like you say, so many great moments. I just love, like, the Jeff Goldblum line, is that my coffee machine?
Yeah.
And the score, well, not the score, but the song choice, which is basically Sue George from City of God. He basically does, it's all David Bowie covers, and they're all fantastic. And I have a theory about the end. I guess we can discuss it now. So there's this whole thing that he's basically filming another sort of TV show about this whole sort of story where he reconnected with his son and going after the jaguar shark which killed his partner. Now, I mean, this film's, was it 14 years old or something? So I think we can talk about spoilers, okay. Mm-hmm. But Owen Wilson's character dies sort of towards the end. But I'm pretty sure that at the end of the film, when they all return to the ship, he is on the ship. And I think that whole death sort of sequence was created by Steve Zissou for the show to create more impact. Am I mad, or was I imagining that, or is this a theory which other people have?
I've never heard that theory before, so that's always a good sign, or maybe a bad sign, whichever way you want to take it. But like, I've never heard that theory. It's definitely an interesting one. I personally don't feel that was maybe kind of what was going on. I just, I think they had full intention of going down there and killing the jaguar shark. But I think that the events and the death of Ned just kind of brought a somber moment to it. And I could certainly see the working behind that sort of theory, but no, I'm not going to subscribe to that one. But it's certainly going to colour how I watch the next one, I think.
Well, I'm gonna have to now watch this back and find that moment and take a screen grab or something and show you it to try and figure out this, because I'm sure I don't know if I've invented it in my head, but I was sure that's what it was. But I guess that's we can, if you're listening to this podcast and you have any theories on the ending of Life Aquatic, please let us know who is right and who is wrong, or if you have another theory about what was going on, I'm sure we'd love to hear it. So, but yeah, no, Life Aquatic is an excellent choice at number 2. And my number 2 is the best.
I think that was my number 1.
Was that your number 1?
Oh, wait, no, oh my god, I've spoiled it. I've accidentally closed. That is my number 1. And I have, oh my word, I actually do have a number 2, and for some reason I closed that tab. So Life Aquatic is my number 1, but I will, you will now get the prequel in the next one. Oh my dearie me.
Well, I guess we'll see. Is your number 2 Jaws by any chance?
No, it's not.
It's not. So you didn't have Jaws in your top 5. Okay.
No.
Jaws is my number 2, and I was going back and forth on this, given that Jaws is the most iconic, the most famous shark movie ever made. Is it too obvious a choice to put in the top 5? But then I thought, you know what? It's a great film anyway. You look at it. Of course, I'm going to put it in my top 5. So yeah, my number 2 is Steven Spielberg's Jaws, which I was lucky enough to see recently at the Edinburgh Film Festival with a live orchestra score. It was only at that moment, which I think we've talked about this before, that I realised that there's actually surprisingly little music in Jaws. It's basically the main theme played over and over again whenever the shark arrives, but it is a great theme. But it's just one of those movies that it sort of brings me back to my childhood, and sort of it's just great film, very well told. It's, you know, they say it's the original summer blockbuster. It's just great storytelling. I like, you know, there's great lines in it, like where this guy says, you know, how can you live on an island, you know, when you hate the water? And he says it's only an island if you look at it from the water. So, you know, it's that kind of thing. And the three great performances from Roy Scheider, Richard Dreyfuss, and, you know, for me, Robert Shaw's Quint steals the whole show. From that, he's got one of the best character introductions of all time, sort of scratching the nails down the chalkboard. And, you all know what I do. You know, for 10 grand, you get the head, the tail, the whole damn thing. And, you know, you've got, each character's got a storyline that they're working through, and it all sort of comes to a head at the end. But, I mean, that whole scene on the Orca where you get the Indianapolis speech, and, you know, it's just masterful storytelling, very well. I mean, you only spend less than 2 hours with these characters, but you feel like you've known them forever. And, you know, it's a film which has succeeded despite of its, you know, problems. You know, there's a documentary's been made about, you know, just how bad this rubber shark was, and it was going to be featured a lot more, but then because it wasn't working, they basically went with the style in which they've got, in which it's hardly ever seen, and the music becomes the shark instead, and it just works perfectly. I mean, everyone knows about Jaws. They don't need me to go on about, you know, what it's about and how brilliant it is, but yeah, that's it. My number 2 is Jaws.
Well, at least you ranked it in the correct place.
Exactly. So what would your number 2 be?
Yeah, my number 2 was a movie that should have been the biggest franchise in the world, and that's Master and Commander: The Far Side of the World.
Well, it's maybe a good thing that you missed it, because I have that at my number 1. My number 1 film is your number 2, and that is, of course, Master and Commander: The Far Side of the World. And I agree with you 100%. This film absolutely 100% deserved a sequel, and it was billed, you know, as being Master Commander: The Far Side of the World, as in, you know, it should have. It was based on one of the books, and I think there's about 18 different books about Captain Jack Aubrey and his various missions on the sea. And yeah, I just don't know why now, 15 years on, we haven't had another one. What do you like about Master and Commander so much?
I just always remember that first time I went to see it, and it's the type of movie that when you're younger, you hear that these are the movies that perhaps your grandfather watched, you know, the big seafaring movies that, you know, kind of end up sort of playing randomly on Film 4 in like Saturday afternoons or Tuesday afternoons. I remember just going to the cinema and just being really so impressed with this, like, you know, things like Pirates of the Caribbean were to come, but something like this felt like it was a real snapshot into a time of like a piece of history that, you know, it was really kind of captured on modern film. It felt so big in scope and scale. You know, the score was wonderful, the performances were big and bold. It was just like, you know, it really was sort of like a, you know, a perfect adventure movie, really, in a way. And, you know, we kind of look at the movies that kind of now would class as adventure movies. You know, they're so big, you know, there's CGI ships and so on. Whereas this felt like everything felt real. You know, the pain people felt, you know, the surgeries that would have to happen. It wasn't a romantic film in any sort of respect. You know, their ideals and beliefs were, but the reality of working on this ship was far from it. And I think it was a fantastic movie. I think, you know, Russell Crowe he is made for a movie like this, and I just think yeah, I really enjoyed it so much. Why did it kind of become your number 1?
I mean, for a lot of the sort of same reasons. It came out a couple of years after the original Pirates of the Caribbean film, and it's a film which skirted around the number sort of 5 position for me, which, you know, I thought the first one was really enjoyable, but this was in a whole nother level. This was, you felt like you were on the ship, and everything was very, like you say, very authentic, very real. This was like what life was like if you were living on the 7 seas and involved in these sort of battles with sort of the French Armada, and also the sort of more quieter moments with the with sort of Paul Bettany's doctor, who sort of was interested in the wildlife on the Galapagos and stuff like this. So, I mean, you basically spend a lot of time. It's got subplots, and it's got this, the revenge plot where Captain Jack Aubrey is looking to get this mysterious French ship that attacked them, and he wants to try and track them down. But also, it's more just about what life is like on these boats, and the direction is fantastic. I think the acting is superb. I mean, yeah, Russell Crowe is, for me, almost maybe never been better than Captain Jack Aubrey, and the partnership he's got with Paul Bettany's in it is fantastic. And people could say it's a man's film, because there are no, from what I can remember, there's no female characters in this whatsoever. I think there might have been like a Polynesian girl sort of in a boat, sort of smiling at them as they sort of do trades and stuff like this. But yeah, it's just life at sea, and it's just incredible. And it's a film which, Russell Crowe, Paul Bettany, if you happen to be listening to this, please make a sequel. I know they're talking at the moment about a sequel to The Nice Guys, another Russell Crowe film, which I'd be happy to watch a sequel of. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think we really need another Master and Commander film. And, for me, it's got one of the best bad jokes in the history of cinema. And it's one which, is so bad, but I always love it. And it's the bit where the Captain Jack is asking Paul Bettany's character about which bug he thinks is larger or smaller, and basically it's about the lesser of two weevils, and for some reason it cracks me up every time I hear it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's one of those films which is, it harks back to like a different time. Sort of, it feels like the sort of like the films they would make in the 50s and stuff like this, old school sort of Hollywood. And it's a film that seems to have been overlooked, and although it's a very underrated film and not many people have seen it, but it did get a lot of credit at the time. It was nominated for several Oscars. It was nominated for Best Picture and stuff like this, but just didn't make the impact that I think it deserves. And I think if anyone was to watch it now, it's one of those films that if people say, what's one film that you could recommend that people maybe haven't seen before, I would absolutely recommend Master and Commander 100%, and that's why it's at my number one.
And it gave birth to one of my favourite South Park episodes, where they I don't know if you've ever seen it, where it's the Russell Crowe fighting around the world, where Russell Crowe is Tugger the boat, and he's sitting there in a captain's outfit, just like fighting around the world. And yeah, that's the closest I think we'll ever get to a Master and Commander sequel, is Russell Crowe fighting around the world in his boat.
That's sad, but Hollywood, please commission a Master and Commander sequel. We can start the groundswell of support, and we'll see. I think Russell Crowe would be up for it. I think he could still play it. Paul Bettany could still do it. So yeah, let's get back on the seven seas again. Come on, let's do it.
Sounds good to me. Well, I think we'll definitely get that campaign up and running.
Absolutely. But that's us doing our top five and in the correct order. So my number one was Master and Commander, and your number one was Life Aquatic. So those are two huge recommendations for the week, along with First Reformed, if you can catch it, and also The Meg, if you're up for a bit of stupid sort of Friday night violence. So yeah, so we'll be back next week on the Filibuster. But have you got any more interviews lined up for the Fringe Festival that people might be able to catch up on?
We'll be back on Monday. So we had a bit of a bumper one, obviously, this Monday, and it'll be the same again on Wednesday, on this coming Monday. So I'll have Rick Carranza. He'll be coming back to talk about his Star Trek show. I've got Ari Schaefer coming on. He's hot off his Netflix original comedy show. He's going to be coming on. I'm really excited. Sort of during this episode recording, it's been confirmed that Latita Doesh, the French actress, will be coming on this week as well. People might recognise her from Je ne Fimi. She's been described as France's own Greta Gerwig. She's performing here at the festival in a play, and she'll be coming to talk with me, so I will be off to meet her tomorrow, on Thursday actually, and then we've got maybe one or other two just to sort out. So we'll have a bumper one on Monday, and then it'll be back to me in Dallas on the Wednesday.
Fantastic. So yeah, keep tuned to the Nerd Party for all these Filibuster updates, but also check out other shows such as Nerd Nutshell, Missing Frames, Aggressive Negotiations, and say Alpha 3. But until next time, I guess all we can say is to cap it off in the same way that Chief Brody would at the end, which is smile, you son of a bitch. We'll catch you next time.
Bye.